Thanks, Jill. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome. I think that you're in for a very informative and interesting webinar this morning.
Mhm.
I am with the Northeast Ohio, or excuse me, the Ohio University Procurement Technical Assistance Center. And I am joined today by my director, Sharon Hopkins. A little bit about PTAC. We are funded by the Department of Defense to provide absolutely at no cost government contracting assistance to small businesses. Our services range from helping businesses get registered in various databases that are required for government contracting. We can assist with the different business certification programs. We have a bid matching program where we can help companies look for opportunities. And then when an opportunity is found that you'd like to pursue, we can assist with the bidding or proposal development process. We can also assist with marketing, creating a capability statement, essentially anything that you might need to be a successful government contractor, we can provide or help to provide. If you would like to receive our services, you can go to our website, which I put into the chat, ptac.ohio.edu. There are PTAC offices all across the state as well as across the US. So there is definitely a PTAC near you. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Jane. Now we're going to switch over to Shonda, and Shonda is going to introduce herself, the panelists, and moderate. So thank you, Shonda.
Thank you, Jill. And again, for the recording, I think some of your intro, we weren't recording. So again, welcome everyone. Good morning. Today is Thursday, June 24th, and we'd like to welcome you to our panel discussion. Our webinar today is Best Practices for Continued Contract Success, Part 3, from a small business perspective. So some of you that are on today's webinar may have participated in last week's webinar. As Jill said, we did have some government personnel sharing their perspective about best practices for continued success with their contracts. And then the previous week before that, on June 10th, we did have a PCR procurement center representative and a CMR from the SBA to give their perspective, a commercial market representative. So today we have a very seasoned panel of small businesses that have done a variety of different contracts, just about on every government level, federal, state, city, county, as well as airports and the private sector. So without further ado, we are going to allow each panelist to kind of take 2-3 minutes to introduce themselves, say something about them so that you know them. And I think we'll go ahead and start off with Frank, because he already has his information on his slide. So can we have Frank like in the center, Sharon? I don't know how we can do that. So we can share his slide and then I'll pull up the next panelist. Is there a way to, okay.
When he talks, he should show up in the center.
Okay. Frank Harris from John Cecil Construction. You'd like to kick us off and introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you again, Chandra. As she alluded to, my name is Frank Harris. I am the owner of John Cecil Construction. We've been in business going on 12 years now. We've been lucky enough to be successful with the help of the SBA and all of the other agencies. That's how I'll say it. We currently have contracts with DSCC, the FAA, Homeland / Border Patrol, and the National Forestry industry. So like I said, we're very diversified, and we're just here to answer whatever questions you guys may come up with later on.
And Frank, you also have some ODOT contracts as well. I know.
No,
ODOT's
we're
I
actually
think-
ODOT certified, but right now I
Okay.
do not have any ODOT contracts. I
Okay,
apologize, I do not. I wish I did.
Okay.
I do not.
okay. Thank you so much, Frank. And next, let's see. I'm gonna share my screen and bring up Michael Horn with Brothers Body and Equipment.
Hey, I'm Michael Horn. You could see what my company is and does. I'll bore you with a little bit about me. I retired from the Army in 1994. My last job was writing contract requirements for mortar, missile, and flame weapon systems for the Army. And I learned all about the FAR and contracting at that time. I bought my company in 2006, and we've been doing a whole bunch of government contracting. In my spare time, I teach active duty, guard, and reserve soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines how to get into business and how to be business owners. And vettheceo.org is the nonprofit that I founded. And I enjoy helping veterans learn about being in business. Over to you, Shonda.
All right, thank you. Let me see if I can get my screen meeting control. Let me stop sharing that. Thank you so much. And might I add, we have a wide variety of small businesses that cover a range of industries, and all of them are, or at some point, have worked with PTAC. So we are grateful for that. Let me bring up our next individual, Bob Dorsey of R. Dorsey and Company.
Thank
Bob,
you, Shonda. Well, again, thank you, and welcome everyone to the session. I have to tell you, you're doing the right thing if you're looking to grow your business just by scanning the field and staying in touch with those who are already well connected. As you can see from the slide, we've been in business in technology. We are a software engineering firm, and we opened our doors in 1996 and have had a variety. We started all in commercial, so some of the clients you see there include JP Morgan Chase, Nationwide, Children's Hospital, and others. And about 8 or 9 years ago, began to look at adding in some of the commercial or the federal sector work, and qualified through the 8A program, and have found that to be very, very helpful. Just in being in an area where we can essentially have an at-bat, if you will. When you're competing with a Northrop Grumman or a Lockheed Martin, it's a tough uphill fight. But in this context, you're really working in the government sector with similarly sized firms. So certainly building out and staying in touch with PTAC and the SBA has been fundamental to our success in the federal sector. And we do enjoy a couple of federal contracts. And you know what I find, and you'll probably hear it throughout the day, is it's very similar to the commercial world. You have to deliver what you promise and recognize that each of your clients has a life and a set of interests and worries of their own. And if anything we can do as vendors, one of the most important things is to just make their life a little bit easier. So thank you, Shonda.
thank you, Bob. And we are grateful that we have, again, a wide variety of industries represented, and then all of them bring their background, their past performance along with them. So next we are going to have, let's bring up Cassie. If I can find I have it up. Uh-oh. Well, Cassie, I
That's
am
okay.
not,
Do it.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Good morning, everyone. My name is Cassie Strasberg. I'm with Your Mission Technologies. We're an aviation technology company, a woman-owned small business specializing in air-to-ground systems designed to enhance critical infrastructure protection. A little bit about myself. I spent the last 14 years selling to the federal, DoD, and non-DoD state and local government agencies. The last 7 years developed the strategy and scaled up a business from 0 to 200 million in contracts, and have experience with GSA contracts and the schedule input program, which I know is everybody's favorite when you use GSA. So we provide the following service: consulting service, supporting critical infrastructure, and mission suite packages. And Shonda, thank you for the invite today.
You are welcome. All right, so last but not least, I think I had too much open, Cassie, and I wasn't able to. There is Cassie's information. I had too many screens open and I had to take down something. So Your Mission Technology, so it is being recorded. And then lastly on our panel, we have Miss Judy Palidi, who is going to share her information with us and give us a little bit about herself and her background and what she does with her company. So Judy, you want to take it away?
Sure. Hi, I'm Judith Palidi with Judith Palidi Interior Design. I opened my company in 2003. We're an FBE, LEDE, SDB, DBE business. The acronyms, there's probably more of them out there. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. If you're not, you will be at some point. So with the help of PTAC. We are an interior design firm based in Columbus, Ohio. We work in a broad spectrum of markets. So we're in, as well as federal, we're in commercial and medical and hospitality and corporate, multifamily. So we work with a lot of different companies and a lot of different markets. And we also are a little bit different in that we act on federal contracts as subcontractors. We're really never prime on a contract. So that's a differentiator from, I think, what you're seeing here. I've been on a lot of boards with panels for Shonda, and I look forward to another great panel today. Thank you.
All right, wonderful. So those of you that are joining us, our panelists are from the construction industry, manufacturing industry, IT, information technology, aviation, and then interior design. So a wide range of, again, experiences. And as Judy said, we'll allow you to expand upon that further about you not performing on a prime contract, but you doing a sub contract for your industry. So that can be something that definitely want to expand upon and talk about. So to kick us off, again, as we're doing this panel, we do have questions that we're going to ask individuals. We've sent them to them, but if you have questions that you want to ask, we want to make it interactive so that if you have specific questions, perhaps you're in one of the same industries as one of our panelists, or some of the things that they are saying you really connect. So please type in your questions in the chat. Maybe for some questions, if you really want to ask directly, you could raise your hand. We'll see if we can do that. But to kick us off, let's start off with asking about maybe your first contract. Do you remember winning your first contract? And again, even though we did say we're going to kind of focus on federal contracts, if you have experiences or you want to give your answer, your feedback, and it's for a state or a local or ODOT contract, please mention that, because our viewers can get, they can learn from whatever type of contract that you've been given. So do you remember winning your first contract? What advice, suggestions would you give to those who are trying to secure winning their first prime contract or winning a contract being a sub? So maybe if you can explain a little bit, do you remember winning your first contract? give us a little background, or if not your first one, maybe one of your early ones. And whoever would like to kick us off.
I can.
I like to tell my first contract story. I'm sorry,
Michael, he
Cassie.
sounds like it's going to be fun.
I
Get out
love
your pen
that
and
story.
paper.
The first contract that the company had after I bought it was with the GSA. And GSA. And as a result of that contract, I fired the GSA. I would not do business with them again.
Wow.
And some years later, they called me and said, hey, we would like you to build the presidential motorcade, secondary motorcade fleet for the GSA. Would you be interested in doing that? And I said, yes, I would. But you guys know that I fired you, right? And the guy said, well, we know that we haven't done business with you for a while. So I told him the story of why. And he said, well, we've changed a lot since then. We're not like that. And you'll really enjoy working with us. And I did enjoy working with it. And the teaching point is that when you are in government business, you have to be willing to fire customers. And It's not easy to fire a customer, but you have to do that because the government can be very difficult sometimes, and they can try to take advantage of you. I strongly encourage everyone to become very educated on government business. You should read and understand the Federal Acquisition Regulation. You should sign up for courses at the Defense Acquisition University and take as many courses at the Defense Acquisition University as you can. It's all free, and you'll really learn a lot about government contracting by doing that. So over to you, Cassie. Sorry for
Well, hang on, Michael. We want to give a little more context because out the gate, and this being our first question, if individuals are just now getting started doing business with the federal government, and they may be thinking, oh, fire my government, my first government contractor, my first government contract. Can you give us a little more context as to what happened? Why did you do that? And why do you encourage individuals to really be informed? Because that may not be the case for everybody, but we just want to know why did you decide to do that?
Everyone needs to Google the Anti-Deficiency Act. That is a law that says that the federal government is not allowed to take free stuff from you. And so if your contracting officer representative or someone else that you're working with tries to encourage you to include free stuff that is beyond the scope of the contract, that's a violation of federal law.
Wow.
And you have to, as a contractor, be willing to bring that to their attention, because in the manufacturing business that I'm in, my government contacts frequently attempt to get free stuff.
So that's why he kind of gave that background. Michael, quick question. How many employees do you have? Somebody asked. When you started off?
Yeah, we have a core team of 15 folks, and we scale that team to whatever our requirement is. I've had up to 50 folks, but we have this core team, and I'm happy with that. We're a small business. I like being a small business, and I think being a small business is just a wonderful thing for folks to get into and to do.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Cassie.
Yes, so I remember my first contract, it was in 2007. So it was the first item that I bid on the bid board and dibs.
Wow.
But
what is dibs?
It's the DLA's bid board system.
Okay, for DLA.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so I guess best practice is to ensure success is we had a product that we offered that the government needed, and it was the exact product, form, fit, and function on the NSN, and that's what we were able to provide. So knowing what you can provide or not provide is also, I think, proactive work to do before you even start bidding on any product.
That's good, knowing what you can and cannot provide. So you
Right.
need to be aware of what your core competencies are, what your area of focus, what you can and cannot do. That's very important. Thank you so much, Cassie. Who wants
Can I
to jump in?
Chandra?
Frank?
To reiterate what Mike said, personally, I think I don't really, this is sad. We kind of focus on the jobs that go bad, but don't really remember the new job or the first job. But
Okay.
as a young contractor or starting out, you want to say yes and you want to prove that you can perform. But like Mike said, you have to do what is on the contract documents. Even though it makes sense, you can't go above and beyond. You have to do what they say, because one, either you're liable for the expense or they're asking you to do more and they're not going to pay you for doing more. So you have to follow the contract documents and you need to know them inside and out before you go into a job.
And so what you're referring to is following the contract documents. When you get a contract, there's a scope of work and you may have a performance work statement,
Yes.
statement of objectives, PWS, SOW, or what is the other one? So
ours are mainly scopes of work, but
the
yes.
scope of work, which outlines, okay, here's the project that we want you to do. And we want you to do X, Y, C, A, B, C, X, Y, and Z. So you're saying whatever that scope of work is, whatever the performance work statement, and the government is saying, this is what we want you to do, these 5 things, then you're saying you need to do those 5 things and not 6 or 7, even though the 6 or 7 may make sense, you need to do what was outlined in your contract.
Right. And you also need to pay attention, because just because it says something in the scope of work, sometimes the plans or the specs conflict with that. And you need to know what agency you're working with, because some agencies, the plans supersede the specs, and other agencies, the specs supersede the plans. So you have to be very careful.
So if that happens, and I'm sure that's happened, what do you do in that instance?
It's RFIs. If you see it, you read.
Request for information?
Yes, you ask which supersedes. You say plant tree number 2 here, and then in the next section, it says tree number 3 in this location. You have to ask those questions and document it. I mean, we actually, at our preparatory meetings before a job starts, we go over all of the changes, because you have to, because the government personnel change so much, especially dealing with the military where they go on deployment or do whatever. As we always say, which is an unfair statement, if we all die tomorrow, it's got to be documented so that we're all covered, because the new guy coming in may not know what was agreed to or negotiated.
Okay, so if it's unclear, then you need to ask questions.
And you need
to communicate, and you need to document.
Yes, ma'am.
As you go along. So
Yep.
I'm just kind of recapping. So individuals, okay, communicate, ask questions, and document. Great feedback. Bob or Judy?
Sure, I'll take a run at it. First contracts, both commercial and federal, were the result of face-to-face communications.
Oh, wow.
So in IT, even though it in some cases there is an effort to treat it like a commodity, the level of skill that's required and the variance in the ability of an organization to deliver against a specified set of requirements radically differs. And what I mean by that is the difference in performance from one team to another can easily be a factor of 4 to 6 to 1. So company A may deliver a project for 100,000. Company B may deliver that exact same project for 20,000. And so if you are, no matter where you are, you need to know the talent of your team and your ability. We were fortunate that we started out in commercial before we came into federal, but the exact same set of issues existed, in both cases. And that was that there was a level of trust between the client or customer and us as an organization and our ability to fulfill.
All right, so there's two important things that I heard you say. Develop a level of trust with your customer, and then know the talent of your team.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very important.
As Frank was just saying, you cannot, I mean, it's always tempting to say, sure, we can do that, but boy, it's easy to overcommit.
Easy to overcommit. Okay, Judy, we'll have you go next, and then there's a question in here for you. So when you finish giving your feedback, we'll go ahead and ask that question. So if you want to share about your first contract experience or one of your early on contract experiences and what you want to, suggestions or best practices from that.
Okay. I'm going to talk about the first federal contract that we had.
Okay.
Because we subcontract a lot, we work with, we have a huge group of architecture firms and engineering firms that I've built personal relationships with, and our portfolio is extensive. Therefore, and we have all the certifications. So we're a value add to all of those, architects and engineers when bidding on contracts. So we won a contract with the VA, and typically interior design works on a compressed schedule anyway, because you're working through all the details up front, and some of the engineering firms prefer us to come in at the end. Well, this particular job, the schedule was compressed to a point where it was, frankly, I think we had less than a month to get in, get all the finishes set, all the documentation, specification, all of those things done and approved, and then, provide them so that they can be formatted into the documents. So building on what Frank said, you really have to be able to document everything, and you really have to be concerned about that. And if you're a subcontractor, defining what your parameters are up front is, if you don't do it, you'll end up in a little bit of trouble. Now, we always perform. It's not, you don't quit when you're tired, you quit when you're done. So in that instance, we worked around the clock to get everything completed. We ended up doing more than what the contract stated, because it was our first job, and we wanted to perform not only for the VA, but for the engineering firm and the architecture firm. So, because you're building you're building their success, your success, you want to be a team player, and you want to get a great rating, of course. So we took care of all that. It was an exciting job. It was, it came to completion, and everyone was pleased. I learned a lot on that one. Again, define what your parameters are, learn what your timeframes are, and know what your expectations are and what the end user's expectations are. We had an issue also in that in government jobs, we're used to in the private sector, if we have to get it done, we will sit in meetings from 7 a.m. till we're done. If you're working with military, there's certain things like you have to break for lunch. You have to be out by 4. You have to know how to do that, and just know how people work and interact. And but like I said, it was a success, and we have ongoing relationships because of it. So
okay, a couple of things I got from there. You said, just like with Frank, to document, define your parameters up front. Now, one of the things I do want to bring out, which is very important, is sometimes as a small company, depending on your industry, there may not be a prime contract there for you, which means you get a direct contract with the government agency. Correct. But Judy, the industry that she's in, interior design, the prime contracts are with an architectural firm or an engineering firm. So they're the prime. And then the type of work that she would need to do is she would be a subcontractor. So that's important to know is in your industry, is it an industry where you're primarily going to be subcontractors, or are you going to be a prime, or is it going to be a combination? So that may be a reality. You may never really get a prime contract. It may be a sub. But another important thing you said, to quit when you're done, not when you're tired. Learn your time frames. Know your expectations and the expectations of the end user and your customer, especially if you're a subcontractor. The prime has the direct award with the government. So that line of communication has to be open. And as far as expectations, what's expected of you from the prime, and then as well as your end user, you do have to make sure that that communication is definitely open.
Definitely.
Okay, Judy, this question, you answered the first part. There's another interior designer that's a participant. She is interested in knowing how big your team was when you started.
When I first opened my company in 2003, I had a team of 5, and now we're slim. There's 2 of us, but we actually, and we're looking to hire, of course, always, but everyone knows that. But we actually have alignments in order to scale up and scale down. So when we have more work, we have the ability to bring vetted designers in to complete the work. But it's important to be able to scale. Actually, I worked with Nationwide Insurance, and they sent us to training in Chicago, and all of, everyone's got a diversity program, and they sent us and taught us exactly what was expected for scalability. So it's important to be able to draw in more people if necessary.
That is a very important point. Depending on your contract, the project that you're working on, maybe you came from a larger project, now you're getting a smaller project, being able to scale and either scale up and add more employees, or scale down. And then maybe taking
profitable. You have to remain profitable
remaining profitable,
and be able to weather all the storms, because one market's up, the other one's down. You just keep going.
All right, great information. The questions are coming in. I'm gonna take this next one from the chat, and I'll throw this out to everyone. What is the best method of determining how to properly write up bids, and with whom do the panelists recommend giving the diversity of the panelists? So what is the best method of determining how to properly write up bids, and with whom would you recommend that somebody go with as far as writing the bids? You guys have someone on your team? Is that something that you use a consultant for, but as far as the writing the bids for your contracts?
Shonda, it would be helpful to perhaps know who the industry that the person is representing when they ask that question. Certainly in bidding, if you're looking at this, Mike, you probably are familiar with the Shipley method, or the process. Large organizations use a model called Shipley, and the books are out there. It is extremely involved. When you come down to a small business, you can use about 10% of that. But if you start to get familiar with Shipley, you'll at least have the paradigm. So if you have an opportunity to team with a Northrop Grumman or an SAIC or any of the large players, they all use that methodology, and you will at least be familiar with the terms and the language. Again, you don't need all of that. I guess the other, and I'll throw out the first thing and everybody else can jump in. First thing is when you take the requirement or the RFQ, the quote request, to make a checklist first and make sure that you are hitting all of the critical elements. And somewhere in the equation, you also have to address the question, why do you think you can win this proposal?
Great information. So again, depending on your industry, there may be a format that may be best. Bob is in the IT industry. There's a Shipley method that he said. And one of the things is knowing, he said RFQ or RFP, request for quote, request for a proposal. We did a training on RFP, RFQ, responding to RFIs. I believe last month there was a series. So this is a plug to go back and watch the webinar from the previous training that I believe we did last month. That will be helpful. And then also the series from April on capture management. And that could give more information and context to what Bob is saying. And then to know why. I think the last thing he said is to know why you're responding. What will you be able to offer the government as far as value? Does anybody else, great answer, Bob, want to jump in and add? Maybe there's something different for your respective industries.
In my industry, it's important to make sure that you answer every question or address every question. And so you mentioned having a checklist. That's very important, because if the government wants a piece of equipment to do this, then you need to make sure that you tell them that your piece of equipment is going to do that or what it's going to do. So following the request for quote or the request for information is very important. We also respond to a lot of sources sought. The government goes out and they look, they want somebody to build something for them. And typically we tell them, yes, we can do that. When you need it and how much do you want to pay? And they will come back and they will answer that for you. So it's just important to answer all of the government's questions when you submit a proposal, just like Bob just said. Thank you, Shonda.
Awesome. And again, as we're going along, some of you may not be familiar. We have companies that are on here at different ages and stages and phases of their business journey. So sources sought, if you're not familiar with that, is the government may be doing market research. They're looking to put out a solicitation. Maybe they're trying to see if there's a small business out there that can perform on this, or they need to, they don't quite know how to do it. So they're looking to the industry for their expertise. So for more information on sources sought, RFI, RFQ, please go back and visit a previous webinar, I believe from last month in May, where we talked about that. And then also, Michael said, answer every question. It's important to have a checklist and to make sure that you're following and giving them the information that they're looking for. Great information, Bob. Looks like Frank, you're ready to go.
I am. In the construction industry, we use what is called an RS means.
RS means?
RS means. It's
RS
got
means.
masonry, it's got, and basically it is just a price, I'm gonna use per square foot to erect a building, whether it's lay block, lay. Now, I will say, in using the RS means, you also, as Bob has reiterated, you have to know what you do. So if you're going to bring in a sub, you have to look at that stuff. Who are you going to bring in? Are they quality? Can they perform? And are we going to be able to do this work? Secondly, look at the RS means, but RS means doesn't cover demoing out a water closet and putting back drywall or doing whatever in the construction industry. So then you got to take what their recommended price per square foot is, because you have to see it in the fact that you're erecting a building so you can move people from floor to floor to floor. So it's very efficient on the basis of RS means. So you have to put your thoughts to it to relate to the RS means, if that makes sense. You know what you're bidding and bid it on how you're going to do it, because it does no good to get an award if you can't do the work. Period.
That's good.
Just because somebody else can do it in half the time, once again, doesn't mean you can't. So that's all I wanted to reiterate.
No, and I think it's a great point, and I think it re-emphasizes a lot of times we as resource partners encourage individuals, if you're just getting started in business, you may want to wait before you pursue a federal government contract, because as you can see, the feedback that we're getting from each of the panelists, and Frank just saying in construction, there's an RS means that he uses, and you have to know what you can do. You have to know what you're bidding. So you do have to know kind of the strength of your company, where you may have some weaknesses, where you may need to bring in subs, but you do have to know what you're bidding on. That's great information. Judy or Cassie, do you want to jump in and share for this question?
Oh, just reiterating what the guys had said earlier as well. I mean, usually in DoD contracts, section L and M give you what the requirements are. And then within the contract, it tells you what they're going to rank you on, usually with 1, 2, 3. So if it's technical, price, or past performance, and then make sure you speak to those 3 as well, and how you respond.
Awesome. So if she said a DoD, which is Department of Defense, Army, Navy, Air Force. So if you have a Department of Defense contract, sections L and M of your contract. Again, if you go back to a previous recording, we do have a breakdown about what you need to do and how that you can break down a contract and the different sections and how you need to respond to those sections. And she said it's important, those sections L and M, because that's how you will get graded. So when you mean how you get graded, so a lot of small businesses may not know that when they perform on a contract, you actually, especially for DoD contracts, there's feedback and there's what's called CPARs.
Mhm.
So if you can, I'm just kind of adding this because you mentioned that. So can you kind of talk about that, Cassie, why they should be concerned about how they perform? Because the agency is going to rate them at the end. How does that CPARs work?
Yeah, so the CPARs, I mean, you can have input into the CPARs while you're performing on a contract and work with your contracting officer to write that up. But your CPARs is what the DoD, federal DoD and non-DoD agencies are all viewing. And that provides whether you get satisfactory or above. If you get below satisfactory as unsatisfactory, then they might take a look at you a second glance. So it just depends on what the ranking is in the contract. If they're going to put past performance as their number 1 requirement, you may have to speak to it.
Very important to know. So as you're performing on a contract, at the end that your customer, that federal agency is going to be rating your work if it's satisfactory or above. And so that information will get into CPARs and there will be a record that agency can go back, other agencies can go back to look to see how your work, how other agencies rated you. So just keep that in mind. Judy, did you want to jump in and add anything to that? And I know questions are rolling in.
Yeah, of course. So I said we're subcontractor typically on federal contracts. We are prime on state and local and on our private clients. But as far as writing the bids, we keep our forms. There's standard forms for state jobs and university jobs and all that. So we keep those in a file so that we can just amend our projects to fit each one of those bids. So sometimes it's better for us as a small company to have those readily available as we're asked sometimes last minute to be on these bids. And also ours is request for qualifications because we don't provide goods, we provide services.
Okay.
So it's important that you have all the information and references and all those things available for your bids. And also building your relationships as you're small. If you're a small company and you're a subcontractor on projects, it's really important to maintain relationships, whether or not you're just calling people to see how they're doing. how are you doing? What's going on? You don't always have to be calling up about business, but relationships, I think, are key in subcontracting. And again, answering every single question is so important. If you miss one question, they'll throw you in the trash. I mean, it's over. So, and if you don't win the bid, you can always go in and ask why, and then you can improve.
Awesome.
So
Awesome.
those are my tips.
Answering every question. If you win the bid or if you don't win the bid, you can ask for feedback, what is called a debrief. And again, we do have a webinar where we talk about that previously. I don't know, I believe maybe last month. So asking for those debriefs, what is a debrief? So that's important. Judy mentioned a wonderful key is, especially if you're a sub, even as a prime, building and maintaining those relationships. So as a sub, if you're working with your prime, it may not always be a question about the contract. You just might want to follow up with them to see how they're doing. Maybe something happened, they had surgery. You just want to touch base with them. So making sure that you build those relationships and then you maintain them. She also mentioned about, again, the RFQs, requests for quotes, knowing what industry you're in. If you're in the services industry, what type of solicitation, what will you be responding to? How will the agency be asking you for information? So it's important to know that. And then also she said for her state and local jobs, there were standard forms that she kept in a file. So great feedback. I'm going to jump to the next questions. I think the next question only is for our veteran or those that have the veteran certification, SDVOSV or veteran owned. Do you have any recommendation on how a VOSV, and that's the veteran owned certification at the federal level, certified leadership coach could develop proper connections and relationships to be seen as a go-to resource? I'm trying to read this. If somebody can help me out, because as a go-to resource for leadership development services as a subcontractor.
Yeah, you got it.
I'm trying to scroll and.
So the answer to that question is it goes back to developing relationships and networking. Dealing with government customers in that regard is exactly the same as commercial customers. You have to have a network. And if you're in the leadership and coaching business, you need to meet with and know the other people that are in your network. And by meeting with and knowing the other people that are in your network, then you can become a go-to resource. Someone mentioned previously about past performance. It is extremely important that you maintain a list that you update all the time of your successful past performance. And that list should provide who was the contract with, what's the contract number, what's the contract value, so on and so forth. And you have to be able to provide that to folks so that they could see that you know what you're talking about and you have successful past performance to prove it. And different industries handle that in different ways, but you've got to network with folks. You've got to meet with people and market yourself just like you do in the commercial realm. It's exactly the same with the government. Thank you, Shonda.
Great feedback. Networking and marketing, regardless of what, if it's government, private sector, it always is going to work. One key thing, maintaining a list of your past performance, key to government. And so I believe, as Mike stated, you may want to have a list of all of your past performance that you've done, but also that past performance, you do want to incorporate it into your capability statement. So if you're doing business with a government entity, having that capability statement, which is a one-page resume, if you will, for your business, that's going to help you with your marketing. So part of that is going to have an overview of your company, your certifications, your core competencies, and a list of your current past performance, maybe within the 5 or 7 years. There's trainings out.
I just
Go
want to
ahead.
ask a question real quick from
Go
Michael,
ahead.
because he was talking about networking, and this is really for all of the panelists. If some of our attendees may be brand new to government, where do you recommend they network to find like-minded companies or customers? What are some
Great
good
question.
places to network?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. One of the things that the government does is it has industry days. And they will invite you out on industry day. And it may be related to a particular requirement or product, or, you know, they may have a manufacturing industry day. And you should go to these things, and you should meet with people, and you should exchange business cards, get your PTAC to help you put a capability statement together and hand out your capability statement. And it's basic marketing 101. That's what it is. And your PTAC will help you do that. The other thing that you can do is, if you're authorized, you could go to government facilities and installations and introduce yourself. If you're in the coaching business and you know who at a particular government facility is responsible for coaching and helping the government employees learn about leadership and stuff, you could go out there and introduce yourself, provide them with the capability statement, and share with them who you are and what you do. The same thing is true on a military installation. If you're an ID card holder and you can get on a military installation and you want to meet with someone, you call them up and say, hey, I want to come out and tell you what I do and who I am. And personally, I found that government representatives are very willing to meet with contractors. They are looking for folks that can provide products and services to them. And so you've got to be prepared to give them your elevator pitch and attend events. And that way you'll get to know folks and you'll be able to sell your products and services. Thank you, Shonda.
No, thank you. Industry days. And industry days are not, some of them are for specific contracts and requirements. Some are them for how to do business with. The Sammy Kittyhawk just had an industry day a couple of weeks ago we participated in. So they're posted also in sam.gov on an agency's website. So great way for you to interact with an agency. Anybody else have anything they want to add? Jill's question. How do companies market themselves? Or what would you suggest?
I'll do that because I love to do it. So there's a lot of PTAC events. There was the one in Dayton where you go around, that's huge. And you meet all the industries and you bring your capability statements. I can't tell you how many jobs I've gotten at that fair.
Ohio Business Matchmakers, what you?
Thank you. I couldn't remember the name of it. Thank you so much. Yes. And then for us being in the field that we're in, we interact with people in our field, but we also look at people that use our services. Therefore, we go to engineering events, the CME events I went to for a very long period of time at Wright Pat. And let's see, the AIA events, so the architecture events, just look at who needs your services and get out there and interact with them. Those are the people that are going to give business to you. It's great to interact with people in your industry in that they can provide different resources for you, but sometimes you have to go who feeds you a little bit. So, and those things are important, and just keeping your eyes open. You never know where the next job is going to come from. And then also, in the state realm, there are diversity officers in every agency. So I went around to every diversity officer in every agency and gave them my capability statement and met with them and followed up and called and called and called and called. And that state agencies have a goal, a minority goal. So, and they have to meet that goal. So if you have the capabilities and you're able to do some work for them, you just always ask the question, how can we help you meet your goal? Not, can you give us work? You're there to provide something of value to them. So I think that's important as well, but it's a lot of work, but if you want it, you'll do it. It's a lot, and it can be a lot of fun too. So there you have it.
Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome. And what Judy was referring to when she started off going down to Dayton, she was referring to our signature event that we put on, a collaborative event between the SBA, PTAC, the state of Ohio, SBDC, the Ohio Business Matchmaker. And of course, because of COVID, prior to COVID, it was in person in Dayton, usually in April, at the Nutter Center at Wright State University. But because of COVID, last year it was online in November. This year it will be online again around the November timeframe. So Jill, if you want to put in the chat, I believe we'll be opening up registration in July. So it's our largest signature contracting event. When we did it in person, typically over 500 people would attend, and we would have personnel from federal, state, city, county, local governments there, and it would be like a matchmaking event. You would sit in front of a purchasing person, have your capability statement, and you'd have about 2 minutes, 5 minutes to pitch your capabilities and see if there's a good fit. Also, the state also did do that as well. The state of Ohio, how to do business with the state agencies. You have your MBE and EDGE certification. I believe they may be doing an online version this year as well. But as things start to open back up, you can go to the state's website. And then, as she said, for your specific industry, knowing your industry and what events are there associated with your industry and getting involved with those different groups. Cassie, or Frank, you're ready to chime in, Bob?
Sean,
sure.
I'm sorry, Cassie, just real quick. The matchmaker this year is the 17th and 18th of November. I put the website for the Ohio Business Matchmaker. It's still, it's not live yet for 2021. So the information you'll see on there is 2020's information.
Okay.
And actually, I just realized I just responded to one person. Thank you, Lisa. I will put that out for everyone.
Thank you, Jill.
All right.
Yeah, please check out the website, and we will have trainings leading up to the matchmaker. So we'll have a ton of webinars, how to do business with a variety of different agencies, and then on some specific areas like capability statements, how to market. The links for last year's webinars leading up to the matchmaker are on the PTAC's website. So great plug. Please check those out from last year, but always good information you can go back to. Frank, did you want to chime in and add something?
No, ma'am. I was just fidgeting in my chair. I apologize.
Okay, Cassie or Bob?
Yeah, so to reiterate, just be engaged with your industry. So whatever those associations are, those trade shows, those webinars, same with the agency site, and know who your SBA person is for every agency that you want to work with. And then if you need some introductions, work with your PTAC. They can help you with it.
Awesome. Yes, working with your PTAC. And I believe your SBA person, were you talking about the PCR Procurement Center representative? Yes.
Yep, correct.
And if you want to know, what is a PCR? Who is a PCR Procurement Center representative? We did a training on that. Yes. So there's a link. The very first webinar in this series, best practices for business, for continued contract success. We had a PCR and a CMR give information about who they are and what they do. They can be advocates for you as you're doing business at an agency or help you navigate issues with your contracts. So check out that on the PTAX website. Anybody else want to chime in? Bob, did you want to chime in on that?
Again, personal contacts is easily 50% of the equation, and figuring out how to navigate. Mike referenced if you have access, if you have an ID card, certainly getting access to a base so that you can even introduce yourself is a critical piece in the equation. And somehow every business has to solve that. It's not as easy as the commercial world, but the need is there, and you have to be very concise and deliberate in your message. So thank you, Shonda.
That's important. Be concise and deliberate in your message. Bob, since you're up, there is a question for you. What field in IT was your first contract in? Security, networking, service desk, etc. And how were you able to staff it? And are there fields you believe would be more difficult for a startup business, I guess, in the IT field?
Boy, that's a complex question. It's a good question. We were fortunate in that our staff is all very senior level engineers and architects. And so we staffed with our own team, both on the commercial side and in the federal side. So we didn't staff up to it. There is a choice here in your path, and that is you can staff relatively lower level help desk calls, et cetera, and that's certainly a viable business. And if that's where your strength is, then you need to know that. If on the other hand,
sure.
You're an engineering firm and we've chosen to go after just the most difficult work. And so our staffing is typically in the neighborhood of 15 to 20. We have been as high as 60 to 80. But we are typically looking for the very difficult problems that frequently they've already failed 2 or 3 times.
Okay, awesome. I think it was important that you noted, know your strength, especially in IT. There's such a broad range,
Right.
But knowing your niche, what target that you're going to do in the IT field is very important. And then also what level of government, because the state kind of focuses on a different level of information technology than the federal government. So it's important to know that. This next question is, Bob, if you want to stay right there.
Sure.
This company is also an IT application development, consulting, and staffing. I know at the state level, they do a lot of staffing and staff augmentation. Can you please recommend the best method to find primes to subcontract with before we get our first contract? So before somebody becomes a prime, what would you recommend as far as them becoming a sub?
Sure. So 2 things. One is, first of all, again, a good question. I think you have to survey, you have to work the entire waterfront. There are lots of primes out there, and you have to, again, know what you have to offer them and see if their need may match up to your skills. So all of the larger firms typically have a requirement for subs. And so you just have to continue to look for those and stay on their radar and keep calling until the timing is right. Because they typically, even if you had a great presentation and a chemistry was there, 2 weeks later, they may easily not remember you. Now, another point that you may get to later, and that is if you have key personnel, when I look at my key personnel, if I have a period where they're not committed, if I release them, they will not come available again in my lifetime. And I can't build a practice around skill sets of somebody that no longer works for me. So I have to have a bench policy, and I have to have cash reserves to make payroll for when there is a downturn in business. So you have to, part of this equation has to be, you have to manage your working capital reserve. Everybody will have a different level of comfort with that, but I could not imagine releasing any of my key engineers ever.
Awesome. I'm gonna note that, and that is one of the questions that we sent to everyone, and we do want to circle back to that. Manage your working capital and being able to do that. That is important. Since we're on that, managing your working capital. So with you getting your contract, how important is it for individuals to have as far as their resources and being able to, even though they can do the work, how important is it if they don't have the contract financing? Can anybody, if they want to speak to that, what is your advice or your best practices as far as expanding your capital, your resources to actually get the contract?
I'll answer that. The SBA will provide you with a certificate of competency, a COC, and the contracting officer prior to award, and sometimes post-award, if you're a small business, may request a COC. So if you have not yet demonstrated your financial responsibility to the government, you may have to get a COC. Different industries deal with this in different ways. In my industry, the common commercial practice is that customers pay in advance, or they pay as the project proceeds. And so if that's the common commercial practice, then you can request that of the contracting officer. Typically, we request installment payments from the contracting officer, but you can also request progress payments. Progress payments are based on a percentage of work complete. Installment payments are based on chronology or the calendar. And so generally, I ask the government to finance my projects. When they want to buy a fleet of vehicles, I tell them they have to pay X dollars down up front. And then as we deliver, we receive the final payment from the government. That is a wonderful component of government contracting, the fact that they do provide commercial financing, but that is applicable only in certain industries. It's not applicable in every industry. So you need to, depending on what your industry is, you need to familiarize yourself with both the common commercial practice and what is allowable in the federal acquisition regulation, because the FAR is what dictates what you can do. Thank you, Shonda.
Awesome. Great information about commercial financing, knowing the different type of payment methods. Is that an option for you and what you do in your industry? You should know that, or you should be able to find that out, knowing your industry and what is allowable. Anybody else want to chime in? Or also, are there any financing consideration that contractors should think about before they bid on any federal work? Because some of these contracts are really huge. Are there any financial considerations that they should be thinking about before they even bid on a contract? Anybody want to chime in and add additional?
Well, you absolutely need to be able to deliver what it is you're telling the government you're going to deliver. I have had several contracts where they have come to me and said, we had to fire this particular vendor or contractor. Can you do this? And so then you need to look at the requirements, and you need to determine whether or not you can do it. You need to provide them a quote. So you have to have the money to complete the project or complete the contract. And so you need to find your own sources of working capital in order to make that happen. If the government is not going to provide commercial financing, depending on what your industry is. Thank you, Shonda.
All right, so knowing your working capital, maybe getting a line of credit, or, but knowing that in advance before you start performing on a contract. Frank or
Sandra, I'll
Cassie.
jump in.
Go ahead.
It kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier. You have to know what you're going to do. Mike just said it. You can't jump on contracts just because you want them. You have to be able to have the funding, and you have to be careful with lines of credit too, because you can overextend yourself. I mean, it's a juggling act. You have to know what you're going to do and have the funding to be able to do it. It's some of the best jobs you get are the ones you don't take. It's a funny statement, but if you think about it, you just walk away from it. It's better off that you walk away and take a smaller job than to jump on something too big for you. And then you're chasing your tail, trying to figure out how to save it, for lack of better words.
Now, being in the construction industry, can you kind of talk about, there's a balance between financing and then also with construction, in the construction industry, you have to be able to have the right bond. So bonding is important.
Correct.
So can you also speak to that?
Your insurance in order, same thing. You know, you have your bid bonds that you have to provide before you ever bid the project or while with your bid documents. But yes, you have to, it goes back to what I said before, you have to evaluate before you ever bid the job. Can we do this? Because we've bid a few jobs without getting deep into it, that it was the biggest jobs we've ever bid. And you're like, okay, are we ready to do this? It's a major decision as far as bonding, and you have to clear that with your bonding and insurance as well. I mean, you have to sit down with them because they have to know what you're going to do, because they're not going to write you a bond if they don't think you can financially withstand the work you're about to take on.
Now, how can you go from, like, I'm sure you worked on some smaller projects to where there was a smaller bond, but then you want to go to a,
it's a $5,000 project to start. It's a $10,000 project. It's a, you know, and as you get, you know, what is bonding is 10%. So if you have $100,000 in the bank, bonding will usually bond you for a $10,000, or you know what I mean, for a $10,000, or sorry, I'm screwing this up. You got me messed up with the numbers. It's a 10% increment. So if you got $100,000 in the bank, you can bond $1 million job.
okay.
That's just a rule of thumb. And bonding will look at it, and because we provide stuff to our bonding companies for our jobs. And this is what we're looking at. Is this okay for us to go after it? Because it does get, when you get into the larger contracts, it's a big step. So I don't know what the best practices are. I know we did just stepping stones. We started small, and as we've gained money in the bank, we've taken on larger and larger projects.
No, I think that's always good. Start small and then working with your bonding company. So you're not just doing it on your own and making those decisions.
No, bonding has to know, because you're gonna sit in a room with them 2 or 3 times a year and explain where you're at. And you don't ever want to sit down and be delinquent on a job with your bonding and insurance, because that's a whole other slippery slope that we don't even want to talk about.
Awesome. That's very important. I'm going to go ahead and go back to some of these questions in here. Lisa is a WOSB certified. She is WOSB certified and works with water and wastewater. Currently, her business is a sub. She's a sub to a prime at a military medical center. I'm sorry, I'm trying to read this and
I can see, Shonda, do you want me to?
Okay, she's voluntarily agreed to broaden her business scope due to another vendor failing to perform, and that vendor's failure to perform directly impacted her business's ability to provide water quality that is regulated by the Ohio EPA. You can read that. I'm trying to scroll. It's just hard for me to scroll. So if.
Okay, hang on. How do any of the panel members, in particular Michael Horn, handle situations of, hey, can you help me with this pain?
I frequently have that issue. I love telling this story. I apologize up front. 2 weeks before Christmas one year, the VA contacted us and they said, can you build us satellite communications trucks? And my brother told them, yes, when do you need them? And the contracting officer told us when he needed them. And we had never built satellite communication trucks before, but when the VA calls you up and says they need your help, you help them. And so we put together a proposal and a design, and we sent it over to the VA. And the VA was in a really big hurry to award this before January the 1st. And so we had a hugely compressed timeline to provide the VA with what they wanted. And so we had some designs and we put it together. We gave it to them and they said, okay. And on December the 31st, we had a contract signed and we were in the satellite communication truck business via the VA. So things like that can happen to you. Once you're established in business, you'll find that customers will reach out to you depending on what your socio-economic pedigree is. A contracting officer may need a woman-owned business to do something or a veteran-owned business to do something. And so they go through their list and they find somebody that they think might be able to provide it. And they'll get on the phone or they'll send out emails and you may end up with a contract like that. Thank you, Shonda.
All right, good feedback. We'll try to get, because the questions are coming in, get to all the questions. In construction and in general, if you are a sub, does it benefit the prime or a primary sub to have all of the certifications, MBE, SBE, et cetera?
I'll take it.
Okay.
You ready? Yeah, it does. There are certain set asides for those MBE, EDGE, DBE. Like DBE contracts are typically 20% of the total contract amount. So in order to, like for the airport contract we have an interior, a 5-year interior contract with them, and they requested a DBE for that. Then we also are part of the architectural contract, and they had a 20% DBE on that contract as well. So we were 100% on the interior and we're 20% on the architectural. So, and that's reimbursed through the government. So yeah, those requirements and those certifications will benefit you as long as you have the portfolio and you know, the experience to back it up, and the relationships in order to engage with your prime. But yeah, absolutely, I'd suggest getting all of them. As many as you can get them and market them.
Market them, but not lead with them, right?
No, you lead with your experience and your relationships, and then you say, and I also have this. And as you build your relationships within those agencies, through your diversity officers, they know you. So when you go into interview, I mean, in ours, we have to interview. So for professional services, we do the interview. They know us when we walk in the room. So we're a known quantity and we're the value add in that respect as well.
Awesome. And if you want to know DBE certification, disadvantaged business enterprise, if you're doing business with Department of Transportation, ODOT, I do see we have a couple of ODOT resource partners, Jolita, Lisa Washington, shout out to them. There was a training that we did on Tuesday with the DB certification in 8A, so you can check that out. You can email them for more information about the DBE certification. Anybody else want to chime in about the certifications and being a sub and having those? Is it important? What would you recommend?
These socioeconomic certifications are very important because this is how government contracting officers find vendors. They have requirements. A contracting officer gets a gold star on his annual report card if he awards so many contracting dollars to veteran-owned, service-disabled veteran-owned, hub zone, whatever it is. And so they have to have a way to find you. And the way that they find you is by these lists that the state of Ohio maintains, or the Center for Veterans Enterprise at the VA, or the SBA maintains. And so all of these socioeconomic pedigrees that you are eligible for is important that you have. But I want to go back to what Shonda said, which is very important. You don't lead off with that stuff. You lead off with your successful past performance and the fact that you can perform the mission that is being assigned to you by the contract. You just happen to be woman-owned or veteran-owned or whatever it is. So it's very important that you don't lead off with that stuff, because that is not the critical item of success on the contract. Thank you, Shonda.
So those certifications are kind of like the icing, the sprinkles, or a cherry on top of a cake, but you actually have to have the cake. So your past performance and you doing the work is the actual cake, and those certifications are just the icing and the cherry on top. Great, thank you for that. Trying to move along, I see as time is going along. How do non-veteran owned businesses get an, how do non-veteran owned businesses get, if somebody can help? It's just hard for me to
get an
move this little.
opportunity to work with the VA, i.e. medical centers. My firm has a lot of healthcare experience.
And the answer to that question is exactly the same way as everyone does. You've got to market yourself to the VA. You've got to do the industry day thing, just all that stuff that we were talking about before. You've got to make them aware that you exist. And the PTAC can help you do that. Contact your PTAC, help them, ask them to help you figure out how to contact the small business liaison officer at a particular government industry, because those small business liaison officers, their job is to hook up small businesses with that government entity. And the PTAC can help you do that. You could do a web search of SBLOs, small business liaison officers for government entities, and it'll give you a list of names and phone numbers and email addresses. But you got to market yourself. You got to get out there, and you've got to market yourself just like you do in the commercial world. Thank you, Shonda.
And as Judy said, put the work in. And I think sometimes businesses have the impression that the VA only does business with veteran and service disabled veteran-owned companies, and that is not the case. So there is parity among the set-asides, but the VA does partner with veteran and service disabled veteran-owned businesses first, but there are still opportunities for you. I do agree with Michael that knowing your small business liaisons and getting in contact with PTAC, they can help you to do that. Shonda, do you want me to keep reading them?
Go ahead, because it's hard for me to kind of click on it, and sometimes I can't see it, but
yeah, I've got it here. So, okay. How can you begin relationships with larger firms when you don't have past performance? My experience is that larger firms are reluctant to add us to a team, even though we have a lot of similar experience.
Anybody want to take that one?
Sure, that was our experience as well. And you keep going back, and you keep covering the waterfront. You have to talk to lots of firms, and you have to talk to them continuously. And eventually, if they know you're not going to go away, and if you establish a rapport, they will allow you you're looking for just a test. And our my fallback comment typically was, give me a chance to prove myself, and I'll haul out the trash if that's what needs to be done.
And Bob, when you say eventually, what can eventually mean? Sometimes it's not one phone call or two.
You have a call routine set up, basic marketing 101. You have your list, you're calling them, and it may be 6 weeks, it may be 8 weeks, and it may well take you 3 or 4 years.
But you keep at it. You keep trying. You keep reminding your potential customers that you're there and you're willing and you're able and it's qualified.
That's what you signed up for as a business owner.
Yes.
Awesome.
Will this webinar be available for replay? Yes, we are recording it and it will become available on the Ohio University PTAC website in about a week. Question, what is the function of DLA?
I think he already put that in the chat. So let's continue
Okay.
to go.
All
with,
right.
There's
I'll
one
keep
from
going.
Kristen Goff.
Okay, I don't see that. So why don't you go ahead and read that one, Shonda? I don't know where you are.
I've been getting calls regarding if I'm interested in doing business with the federal government after my business was registered. I believe in SAM, was registered with the GSA. Is this a particular practice, or are there outsourced markets that get your info from third parties?
What time did that question come through?
I answered that question in the
okay.
chat.
Okay.
There are all kinds of vultures out there that are going to try to sell you services that the PTAC will give you for free. So I try not to be rude to these people, but I ask them to put me on their do not call list. But if you want help getting into government contracting, call your PTAC. The PTAC will help you out. Thank you, Shonda.
All right.
Okay, I see the one underneath it that came through at 11:21. Nikki Luna. This question is for Franklin and the person who does the interior. Okay, and for Judy. Does it benefit your companies to hire subs that have MBE Edge certifications?
Yeah, we already did that one.
Never mind. I'm just gonna stop. This chat, man.
If and I'm trying to click. I think we've answered them. If you have more, you can type them in. I think, and some of them, like different ones, have been chiming in and answering. So that's great.
I want to go back and talk about something Frank mentioned.
Okay, what is that? Go ahead.
Frank mentioned the importance of talking to your customer, to your contracting officer or your contracting officer representative. Once you get the contract, it's important that you maintain a line of communications with your customer. In my industry, we do status reports. If it's a long-term project, we'll do a monthly status report and we'll have an in-process review. As we near the end of the contract, we'll do status reports every 2 weeks or every week. The key is maintaining communication with the contracting officer, because if something is going wrong or going south, you don't want the contracting officer or your customer to say, "You never told me about that." You have got to ensure that you have all of this stuff in writing. If you send out a regular status report and you have issues in the status report, an example right now is there are huge supply chain issues, and it's very difficult for us to get components. I have vehicles sitting in my plant that are ready for delivery to a customer, but they're missing some little gizmo, and you can't get this gizmo. They're just not available. And so I've got hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting on the plant floor that I can't deliver until I get these gizmos. So you've got to make sure that you're communicating with your customer, preferably in writing, on what the status of your project is. And in this way, your contracting officer representative or your contracting specialist, they're going to love you because they're not going to have to ask you how things are going. And when you sit across the table from them, as Frank mentioned, every month or whatever it is, it's going to be the principle of no surprises. You're not going to surprise anybody with anything. So do status reports, keep your customer informed. It's the same in commercial business, exactly the same. Thank you, Shonda.
Awesome. Status reports, maintaining communication with your customer and your contracting officer. Anybody else want to chime in on that? And then I'm going to circle back to one of the questions.
I'll jump in again.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mike, for reiterating. But also too, in the marketing side, it's a terrible thing to say as a business owner. A lot of phone calls come across our desk as spam calls. You got to answer the phone. You're better off to hang up on a telemarketer than to miss a call from the federal government, because some of the government phone lines are listed or unlisted. And we've had contracting officers call us and it comes across as spam. And if you don't take the call, you'll never know. So like I said, I can't say that enough to, it's better off to be rude to somebody and tell them you're not interested than to miss a call that could be a potential contract. So
that's
keep
good.
that in mind on your cell phones and answering the phones. That's a very big thing. We've got a couple jobs this year with people that started a relationship, and the first thing they said was, "Thank you for answering the phone."
Wow.
So, I mean, I know we're all busy, but it is part of being a business owner. Answer your phone.
Simple, but very excellent advice. Answer the phone if it's spam. Two things related to kind of what you and Mike were talking about. These calls are coming in my screen. What suggestions, advice, best practices would you recommend contractors do after performing a contract regarding closing out or wrapping up their paperwork? So Michael was talking about the status reports. So once the contract is closed out, anything that you would suggest, best practices that you do to wrap up or close out with your paperwork, or is there a process, a format that you follow? Anybody want to jump in?
Looks like I'm jumping in. We
Go
were
ahead.
fortunate enough. I did a lot of work with the Army Corps of Engineers, and they have we like their system, and that's what we run. So we do preparatory meetings at the beginning of the job where we go over any changes in the plan specs, anything that changed during the bid, anything that changed in negotiations, it's all gone over. And then a week into the job, we could do what they call an initial meeting, and we go right back and reiterate on everything that we discussed in the preparatory. Yes, it's 15, 20 minutes, but it allows you that once you start a particular phase of work to go back and say, hey, we missed this, and you can catch it. And then what we do is we actually do a preparatory meeting at the beginning of every designated phase of work, which is construction. For us, it's construction. So whether you're digging a ditch, but we designate phases of work, and we periodically, goes back to document. We do a preparatory meeting, and then a week into that work or a day into that work, if it's only 2 or 3 days, we'll do an initial just to inspect what we're doing to make sure the materials are right, everything is correct. And then it's the same thing with closeout documents. We have our quality control manager on the job will do a pre-final, and we will submit that to the contracting officer. They will double check it, and then we will walk through the job with them at the end of the job to go through any closeout items, anything that needs to be done, because it goes back to the communication. There's no surprises.
Okay.
If there's a delay in a piece of material, it's been noted throughout the job in these preparatories or these initial meetings, you know, this item we're still waiting on. It really is just communication, document. And they, like I said, make everybody's job easy, because everybody does have a life and we have things we're dealing with our families, everything else. It may be work for us particularly, but if we do it every day, it becomes routine. And it just helps the guys. It helps my foremen track the jobs, everything, just because they didn't like it at first, but just doing it just makes a world of difference.
So if that is not a part of, I love that, Frank, a part of that format for that agency, those prep and initial meetings, especially before, at the beginning of the project, and then before each phase of it, can somebody request that?
They don't have to, we just do it.
Oh, you do it.
We do it no matter what, because what we found was when we did go do Army Corps of Engineers work, our guys are already trained how to do it.
Okay.
And we send them to classes to learn how to do it. It just helps the jobs flow. It's just project management 101. I mean, it helps the jobs flow. It helps us document. There's no surprises. We find out if materials aren't American made. Just checking tags on delivered materials to make sure they're American made. Make sure you meet the FAR clause statements. It forces guys to do the little things, and it becomes repetition. And if you do it the same on every job and don't change, because I've had people argue, this is a 1-week job, why do I have to do a preparatory meeting? Because that's our system. It just, it will help us in the long run if there's a problem. Like I said, is it overkill sometimes? Probably, but it works. And
that's a great best practice.
And if it ain't broke, don't fix it, as they say.
Great best practice. And I like that pre-final report you send to the contracting officer, and then they walk through each phase.
The COR and whoever the representative is. And then we always copy everyone too. We do not do direct communication. We contact the project manager, the COR. There's a chain. Everybody gets contacted. That way people can't say they did not receive it. I know that sounds terrible, but
no, great.
You know. And we also, you have to realize, and then I'll hush, the government agencies are working on multiple projects at a time. Don't be afraid to resend documents that you've sent because you'll get, just like you, Chandra, you'll get 150 emails or 500 emails a day. So they get lost.
They do.
Hey, Frank, do you have this? Yes, I'll just resend it to you. It's frustrating sometimes, but no, it's just easier, because you got to realize some people, they get 1,000 emails, 500, whatever a day. You know, it ain't just what you do, it's what they do as well. So, like I said.
So if your customer is asking you for information that you've already sent, maybe once or twice, just resend it.
Yeah, because most of us, if it's something we're asking about, we've already got it pulled up and open. Just resend it. Because we keep all our emails, we keep our correspondence. So it might be easier for us to resend than to just have them search for it for a day. You know, and I don't know how your guys' security is. Sometimes security wipes it out if it's been in your account for so long and it's unopened. So once again, I'll hush.
Someone's asking, Frank, they can't read your screen. Can you put in the chat your email and your phone number, the name of your business, because they can't see it. So if you can type that in the chat. Michael or Judy, Cassie, anybody else have any best practices as far as wrapping up or closing out a contract with paperwork or their processes? That was great, Frank, what you do, that process.
I guess my answer would be that the government already has a process and you need to follow their process. In the case of DOD, the Defense Contract Management Agency and the agency themselves have a specific process that you have to follow, and you just need to do what is required in order to close out the contract. There are contractual financial obligation requirements, and you have to send a letter or an email that says, yes, the contract is finished and there's no additional requirements for funds. And so just find out what their process is and follow their existing process, and you can't go wrong. Thank you, Shonda.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Following what your customer or the government agency already has in place, if they do have one. Judy, Michael, or excuse me, Judy, Bob, or Cassie, do you have any additional information you want
Yeah,
to share?
to follow up on that, I mean, the goal at the end of the day is to get paid, right? So make sure that within the contract that everything's up to date, if there's any modifications that needed to be done, make sure that those are updated. So that way, when you put stuff into wide area workflow or the IPP system for non-DOD, that you'll make sure that you'll get paid. But if they're not up to date within the contract, if the contract doesn't match, they will kick it back since it's going to a different pay agency.
And wide area workflow is the system where you submit your invoice in order to get paid. And we just had a training last week, someone from DFAS that kind of went over some of the information about that and how DFAS works, you submitting that information. So please go back in the chat, look for that link. And then going forward, I think next year we'll be doing some more in-depth trainings on wide area workflow. Is one thing I want to bring up, which somebody could encounter, I think is important. Can you describe a situation where you encountered a problem while performing a contract? And what's the best practice or advice you can give contractors if they have issues, problems, either with their customer, the end user, or issues with a contracting officer, a core, or a specialist? So can somebody describe a situation where they had a problem with the contract and then the best practices on how they addressed it, if it's with the customer or contracting officer core? Bob, Cassie, go ahead.
So bad news does not get better with time. So have your solutions in place of how you want to proceed, whatever the problem is, and then present that back to your contracting officer or core or whoever they have advised that is the point of contact. And then make those suggestions to work on. Things happen. Parts get superseded. Maybe you need to work with a product assurance specialist. The price of materials increased. So work with your contracting officer, but they can't help you if they don't know what's going on. So get them involved early and often.
Get them involved early and often in that line of communication if something should change or as soon as it changes. Because as Cassie said, things happen. If somebody actually has a story that they want to share, they don't mind sharing that, that will be a great example because I think as first time, if individuals that are looking to do business with the government, just so that they know it does happen, but you can recover from it and you can still be successful in closing that contract out. So if somebody has something that they want to share.
Sure, you can actually turn that to work to your advantage. Anybody who's been in business knows that there are going to be hiccups and there's indigestion. It's just going to happen. And we've had that, and the interesting response from the client was, and this really piggybacks on Frank's and Mike's comments earlier. If you're already in communication routinely, and that's every 2 weeks or whatever your project plan or your quality surveillance plan calls for, that is your mechanism, that's your highway for all of this communication. But then an out of sequence communication for us occurred when there was a problem. And so we sat with our technical team and figured out a couple of ways to solve it. When we called the contracting officer, we explained the problem, we explained how it originated, and we gave them a couple of choices on how to remedy the situation. In the final report in the CPARs, the client said that we were the first to call when there was a problem. Before anybody else was aware of it, we alerted the client that there was a problem, either imminent or pending or actually in flight, and we brought the solution. So it made us, it allowed us to stand out. We weren't ignoring it, as Cassie said a moment ago. We were on top of it, and we should be. If we're the vendor, we know that problem is either imminent or it's already in flight.
Mm.
The client appreciates that you're not afraid of it. You know, it's part of life. There's going to be indigestion, but you're going to work it out.
Awesome. That's great approach. Alerting the customers early on, as you said, if the problem is happening currently, or if it's imminent, it's likely to happen. You can see in the future that you can project, hey, this is going to be an issue, letting your customers know. But then you said you were able to provide solutions and options to allow your customers to choose from. Hey, here's the situation that's going on. Here are the potential options that you can choose from. So that's great. Great feedback. Anybody else want to share?
I'll jump in. We had a project just recently where we were doing demolition and a piece of steel poked a hole through the facade, the metal facade on the building. Same thing that Bob just said. We have what we call a deficiency report when something happens that our quality control manager fills out. So it was immediately brought to the attention of the Corps on site. And in that deficiency report, my supervisors, or if they do not know the solution, I will sit down and we will put in 2 or 3 scenarios. How do you want us to address this? Because it is ultimately their decision because they own the property. So, and it is within the contract that we have to repair any damages that we do, whether it's replace the facade completely, you know, patch it, what do you want done? And I always like to rip the Band-Aid off anyway. There's no reason to hide anything. Be honest, because it does, you do get a rapport with people and they understand that you're not hiding nothing. And it's just better. You do get more business, I think, that way, because like I said, they find that out very quickly.
Good. That's good. Be honest, be upfront, don't hide anything.
It's not worth the repercussions. It is not.
That's very good. Very good. And that also could be a great best practice and a great tool that you can use to leverage to get repeat business with that customer, that end user, that client, that government agency, because they know that you're open and honest to talk about issues. You brought solutions on how to solve them. And so they feel that, again, that goes back to building and developing that trust level with your customer. So wonderful. Any additional feedback on that?
Well, also too, it goes to when Cassie was talking about the CPARS evaluations, you can respond to a bad evaluation within the CPARS to explain your position if something came about that may not have been exactly your fault, a misinterpretation, whatever. There is a rebuttal section in the CPARS. We don't usually, I don't want to get into the he said, she said, but there is an opportunity for you to explain your position in the CPARS evaluation.
That's good. And then if you have, going back to your documentation.
Correct.
To where you early on, if you can prove that, hey, we brought this to your attention, we alerted you, we gave you solutions and options. And if it was different than what the government had, if you have that documentation, then you can always bring that up. And if you do need to submit that in your CPARS, you can.
Well, you have to, here I go again. You have to realize sometimes the person evaluating your work doesn't do your work. So you have to be strong with your conviction, like Mike said. You have to know what you do and be confident in what you do. If you make a mistake, you own up to it. But if you didn't make a mistake, you should be allowed to respond and say, divorce, fire your client, whatever you call it. You should be able to respond and say, no, this is common practice. This is what we did. It did not meet the expectations of the customer, but we do not feel we did anything incorrectly in this situation. So once again, done.
All right. We are coming upon the close. We have a few more minutes. 2 more things as we close out. One, as things are starting to open back up, now we're getting ready to enter into the post-pandemic era. Are there any best practices or special advice, suggestions you want to give contractors as it relates to winning contracts in the post-pandemic era as things start to open back up? and we'll want to hear something from each of you, and then we'll give everybody like their last remarks as far as suggestions that they want to give. But as things are starting to open back up,
I'll start since I'm being chatty all of a sudden. I don't know if there's best practices. I will say be fluid, because you have to make adjustments, whether it be, as Mike related to, you can't get a piece or a part. Understand that you can't control that, but what you can do, the pandemic has taught us how to plan and schedule. We need to, because you can't get materials and supplies. We are fortunate enough, we've been stocking up on stuff for jobs. We also are asking during the evaluation phase of bids. The government has to understand prices are going up and you can't control that. So the quicker they can get us approved submittals after award, the quicker we can order product, because most quotes right now on the construction side are only good for a week or 2 weeks, depending on the material. So it's making it very hard when you go into the submittal phase. You can't set on a quote for 30 or 60 days because it's just, you're going to lose money if a product goes up 10% or 20%. So that being said, that's our best practices, is just be fluid and try to work through it. I think we'll be better for this COVID stuff because it's going to teach us how to manage stuff better, but it's going to be a learning process. And I want to thank everyone for listening in and tuning in.
We're not quite finished, but
no, I'm done now.
Be fluid and work through it.
Yes.
Like that poetic.
No,
be
don't be
fluid and work
surprised.
through it. That's good. No,
you know, that's part of business. Try to know everything that you're doing. You may not be the best, but don't be surprised, because being surprised is just like Mike talked about with contracting officers. When you surprise them, they get upset. You better try not to be surprised, because everything is happening right now.
Great. No, wonderful. Love that. Bob.
Sure. I think it's close out. First of all, it's a pleasure to chat for a few moments with everyone, and I wish you all the very best. As we come out of this, I would say two things. Piggybacking on Frank's comments, this is an interesting, unique period in our history, and I think there is some real excitement that we're getting back to business and we can focus and begin to plan and get underway. At the same time, I would overlay that with your marketing 101. And that is, you have to have a marketing plan, you have to have a call schedule. And even though you may own the shop, you've got to have somebody with a whip over you saying, did you make those 15 or 20 or 30 calls today? You've got to connect. And when you do connect, again, come back to Frank's comment, you've got to have an attitude of enthusiasm and excitement for what the future holds, because it's in our hands. Thanks, Shonda.
All right, thank you so much, Bob. Cassie, your final closing remarks as it relates to us, best practices as we're opening up, and suggestions that you can give contractors in the post-pandemic era, and then your final remarks that you want to give to everyone.
Okay, so definitely keep the communication open. I know as local, state agencies, governments, and even federal agencies a lot of times are holding on to spend, which we see that they're opening up. So just be patient, keep that communication open, attend those webinars, industry days, and then as the trade shows are opening up, if you don't feel comfortable in person, a lot of them are doing in person or over Zoom or WebEx. So just participate and engage with the agencies if they're participating in certain events or within your industry.
Awesome.
That's all I have.
Thank you so much. Michael, you want to give us your closing remarks and best practices?
I want to remind everyone that you should not go it alone. You need to be willing to reach out, call Frank, call Bob, call Cassie, call Jill, call Shonda.
Judy.
Call Judy. We're here to help you. That's why we showed up at this thing. So If you need help, don't be bashful about giving us a call, because we are willing to help you out. In the post-pandemic thing, it is a matter of getting back out there and getting reconnected and doing just as Cassie said. You've got to attend these events. You've got to make folks aware that you exist. And if you do that, you will start getting calls. Do as Bob said, get organized, follow a schedule, and stick to that schedule, and that will make you successful. Thank you, Shonda.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. And as Michael said, yes, we are resource partners that we work. Jill and I work for the SBA. Of course, your PTAC counselors, we're definitely here to help. But I do believe when we have these panels from small businesses, if you reach out to them, that's why we chose them. They have their contact information. They'd be more than happy to help you out if they can, to give you some information, answer questions. They've been doing that in the chat. So they know how it is, but they're very successful. So definitely reach out and they'd be willing to assist you. Last but not least, Miss Judy Palidi, your closing remarks, and then as far as best practices, suggestions and advice as we come out of the post-pandemic era.
Okay, well, I'm going to stick with what I have always thought. Stay hungry.
Stay hungry. Ooh.
Stay humble.
Stay humble.
And know your worth. So get out there, get all the information that you can, interact with everyone that you can whenever you can. Stay humble, meaning engage with people out there, ask for help when you need it. Understand that it's difficult for everyone right now. I mean, yeah. and that includes your contracting agents. No one is really certain about how this is going to go. You know, are people back in the office? Are they working remotely? Do they have kids hanging onto their feet while they're having a conversation with you? You know, you don't know. I mean, you have to be really, you don't know what people have gone through over the past 18 months. So be humble and be kind and know your worth. So when you're asking for a job or you're asking if there are jobs available, know what you have to offer and get out there and tell them all about it. And chances are, when you've built these relationships and are maintaining the relationships, they're happy to help you and they're happy to work with you. So those are my three touchstones, really. Be hungry, be humble, and know your worth, and get after it.
And get after it.
Mm-hmm.
So there you have it, folks. I think that's a great way to kind of close this out. All of the suggestions and the advice that everyone gave, and then Judy, just to kind of the recap and say it in short sentences. Stay humble, stay hungry, know your worth, and get at it. So thank you so much to our panelists, Michael Horn, Brothers Body and Equipment, Cassie Strasberg, Judy Palidi, Bob Dorsey, and Frank Harris. Want to thank each of them again today for their time, sharing their expertise, their feedback, their experiences. Thank you so much. All of them bring a wealth of knowledge and past performance to their business, to their industry, and what they do. So thank you to each of them. Do each of you mind if I send out, because people are asking your contact information, even though we put it out? They said yes. Okay, so I can do that. I will send that out to everybody that participated in. You know, who knows from these sessions, I know in times past, they've interacted with other small businesses and you can get other points of contact. Sometimes you could partner up and do business from one another. So you never know. So thank you again. I'll send that out. Thank you to each and every one. Thank you, Jill, and thank you to PTAC, everyone that participated today. We thank you for your time. And I believe Jill is going to close us out again. If you do want the links to this, it'll take about maybe a week, but this will be posted on PTAC's site next week in the chat. If Sharon or Jane would type in again how to access the links to that, please go back and check out this webinar as well as all of the other webinars that we spoke about all of the previous webinars in this series from this month on the small business best practices for continued contract success, part 1 and part 2. And then last month's series that we did on RFPs, RFQs, RFIs, sources sought, and then also in April on the how to look for contracts. I forget what that was, the April series. But go back, all of it's good, even the webinars that we did leading up for the matchmaker in November. So it's all out there. There are about 7 pages of links. There they are, the training webinars. There's the link, check it out. And Jill, am I saying the closeout for next week or?
No, I think it's fine. I just want to say on behalf of everyone, that was a great job moderating, Shonda. Thank you.
I had to listen and take notes, and so if you saw me, I was taking note. I see Sharon has joined us.
There she is. Yeah,
and great job, you too, Jill, chiming in. And I think that's one of the beauty of the things that we do is really we work well with and listening to our small businesses and adding. Yeah.
Hey, Bob, will you mention again, you said at the beginning, you used the model that there are books on it.
Shipley. The Shipley.
Okay.
I can send you the titles.
Okay, because I think that the more information all of us can get on how to tackle government, the better we all are. So
okay. And if you send that to us, I'll send that out also to the participants along with your contact information. Can I ask real quick, since she had her camera off, Sharon Smith, the statewide PTAC director, do you want to share some comments as we close out and speak to the individuals?
You're muted though.
You're on mute. You're on mute, Sharon.
Got it. Thank you. I just have to say this was an awesome presentation, not just the presenters, but in your moderating, but also the questions. These were some pretty insightful questions that you got from our participants in this. And I was just so excited to see Judy particularly on the panel, because it's been so long since I've seen you, Judy. I'm just excited to see you and know that you're doing exceptionally well. But all of our panelists, thank you for your guidance, expertise that you have shared with all of our participants. I mean, I think it's invaluable. You've been there, you've walked the path, and you're willing to share that with all of us today. So I appreciate it, and appreciate Mike almost sounds like he's a PTAC marketer, but I thank you for all of the positive comments about the PTAC and all that we can do for you, and cautioning folks against some of these telemarketers that will call them and offer to provide them with the services that they can get free of charge from the PTAC for a small fee. We do all that we can to make sure that folks are aware of the services that we can provide to them at no charge. It's already been paid for by your taxes. So, be cautious about who you provide your information to. You got to worry about cybersecurity too, but also who you're willing to pay to provide you with a service. At least just check with SBA, PTAC, any of our resource partners to ensure that you're not being taken to the cleaners. But thank you all. This was excellent.
Very good. The only thing that I think that needs to be covered is that we have a training on June 30th next week, actually a week from today, to cover the changes for the system for award management. Billy Grill, OU PTAC Dayton, will be covering that. There has even been changes since we had that webinar the last time. All of you probably know that GSA is combining all of the government contracting legacy systems into SAM, and now Beta SAM has gone away. It's all just SAM.gov now. So we are going to, PTAC is going to lead on that presentation June 30th. So I encourage all of you, if you have questions about SAM or navigating the new FedBiz Ops or Federal Procurement Data System, they're all falling under SAM now. But that's what I have for closing, and thank you for all of your time today. I know all of you are busy. Hopefully you learned something. I know that I do every time. It's just valuable to hear from small business owners. We appreciate you very much.
Yes.
All right.
Have a wonderful day.